Okay, let us all turn to the book of Philippians, chapter 2, verses 25 to 30. Philippians chapter 2, verses 25 to 30. Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians. Philippians chapter 2, verses 25 to 30. If you have found it, let me read here for all of us. Verse 25. Yet I supposed it necessary to send to you Epaphroditus, my brother and companion in labor, and fellow soldier, but your messenger, and he that ministered to my wants. For he longed after you all, and was full of heaviness, because that you had heard that he had been sick. 27. For indeed he was sick, nigh unto death, but God had mercy on him, and not on him only, but on me also, lest I should have sorrow upon sorrow. I sent him, therefore, the more carefully, that when you see him again, you may rejoice, and that may be the less sorrowful. 29. Receive him, therefore, in the Lord with all gladness, and hold such in reputation. 30. Because for the work of Christ he was nigh unto death, not regarding his life to supply your lack of service toward me. One day, in my class, one of my teachers raised a question this way, asking to all of us, including myself, if you die today, or in other words, we can say, in your memorial stone, what you would like to be written there. What he was trying to ask us was that those people who have known you personally, maybe your church members, your fellow friends, or your family members, or anybody who have known you personally and seen you. So when you die, how you want them to remember you. That is a question that he raised for all of us. He gave like 2 to 3 days for us to think and ponder and bring it to the class in a sheet of paper. So here, if I ask the same question to all of you, as a theologian, I also came up at that moment when he asked us, I came up with some kind of statement like, in my memorial stone, I would like to be written there, a faithful servant, or the person who have lived for the sake of the gospel, something like that. Even now, as a theologian, we know how to put it, like just give it at that moment. So even now, for you all, if I ask the same question, what you would like to be remembered after you died? Those people who have known you, how you want them to remember you? You may be able to say it right away, but that the statement that you made, that may not be aligning with your life that you live right now. So the statement that I gave to my teacher, I don't even remember now anymore. Why? Because I was not serious. And then if I have been seriously considering that question and giving that, I would still remember it by now. But I was not very serious and just gave it for the sake of submission. And that did not really align with my life that I live. So the passage that we have just read from Epaphroditus' life, I would like to just draw a few applications that for you and I, just a simple truths that we can see from his life. I would say Epaphroditus had lived in spite of appearing just 6 verses. Philippians 2, chapter 2, verses 25 to 30. And then another passage is in chapter 4, verse 18. We could see just 6 verses he appeared. We will not see in other passages. There are some people who say Epaphras is also maybe interchangeably used, but that is not so. But for Epaphroditus, there are just 6 verses that we could see. But in spite of appearing in just 6 verses, there is a tremendous example that you and I could draw and take from his life. So I would say the life that Epaphroditus had lived, I would call that as a life well spent. So that will also be our topic for this morning. I did not prepare any projector, but I believe that you'll be able to catch up with me. So I would like to talk on the topic called A Life Well Spent. So we will see that from Epaphroditus' life. So the first thing that I would like to draw your attention to is from verses 25 itself. His name, Epaphroditus itself, give quite interesting information for you and I, or a blessing for you and I to draw. If we look at his name, Epaphroditus, that is a combination of two words, Epi plus Aphrodite. Which simply means the one who belongs to Aphrodite, or the one who is dedicated to the goddess Aphrodite. That is a Greek goddess, who is known for the goddess of fertility, love, or pleasure. So his name was given after that goddess. So in that way, we can see that his parents must have been a pagan worshipper. That's the reason his parents gave him that name, the one who belonged to Aphrodite, or the one who is dedicated to Aphrodite. But the moment here we see, when he appeared in the book of Philippians in the Bible, we could see his life got completely upside down, in the sense that though he has a name that's supposed to be belonging to Aphrodite, but in here, when we look here, what we could see is that he was not somebody who belonged to Aphrodite anymore. But on the other side, he was belonging to Christ. That's what we could see. So being born in a pagan family, and then raised and spent whole childhood there, I believe that when he accepted Christ as his personal Savior, he must have been through hard times, sufferings. But in spite of that, I would say he was bold enough to accept Christ and follow the step of Christ. And here also we could see that gospel has a powerful message for you and for me to be changed completely, no matter what our background is, no matter where we came from. But gospel can change your life and my life too, completely different. So he was at once who was heading towards hell, but now, because of the gospel, we could see he was a person who lived for the Christ. So that's the first thing that I would like to draw from his name. And the second thing, verse 25, the following verses we could see Apostle Paul called him with different spiritual designations, or spiritual titles we can say. There are at least 5 of them that we could see. The first one is, let's see, Apostle Paul addressed him as my brother, or you can say brother. So which indicates that in spite of having come out from a pagan family background, what we could see is that Paul does not look from where he came, but he count him as a brother. That means a person who belongs to the same family. Here, it is not a natural parents, but family of Christ. So he has become one family with Christ, with Apostle Paul. So that's the first thing that we could see. And then the second title that we could see is that a companion in labor. A companion in labor, which basically gives us the idea that like Apostle Paul had been going through, he was going through sufferings and difficulties in his life for the advancement of the gospel. So the same trials and the same difficulties even Epaphroditus also faced. So in that way, he was also working for the advancement of the gospel. So let me just help you a bit more. At this time, when Paul wrote this one, he was in the Roman imprisonment. So at that time, the reason why he was in the Roman imprisonment was because of the gospel that he was sharing. So when Philippian church heard that he was in the prison, so they sent some help. So the one who carried was Epaphroditus. So at this time, when Paul wrote this particular text, Epaphroditus also was with him. That Philippian church sent him with the material help since Paul was in the prison. So let us keep in mind that at this time, Epaphroditus was with Paul in the Roman imprisonment. So the third thing that we could see is that a fellow soldier. So this basically tells us that even Epaphroditus was also sharing the same trials and sufferings from different angles that Apostle Paul faced. And the fourth one is that in the same verse, that is messenger. So he was a messenger for the Philippian church to Paul. So as I just said, the Philippian church appointed him to be a messenger for Paul, who was in the house prison in Rome. And then the last one that we could see is that he was the ministered. He was the ministered. This is a combination of two words, like two Greek words, that is laos and ergon, which simply means that the one who works for the people, or simply mean we can say a servant. So Epaphroditus was a person who works to help. So from this particular phrase, chapter 20, verse 25, the last part, the one who ministered to my wants. In some other version, we can see it as the one who ministered to my needs. Instead of using wants, we can say needs. So here, from this particular phrase, the one who ministered to my needs, we can draw very important three lessons. That the first one, see, when Epaphroditus was appointed to go from Philippi to Rome, there were three challenges, very important thing for you and I to observe. Three challenges that include. The first one is that when Epaphroditus was agreeing that he would go from Philippi to Rome, he was well aware that Epaphroditus did not go just to deliver the material blessings and return back to Philippi. But he was also well aware that as he go and deliver those things, he has to also stay with Paul in the prison. And then he has to help him there by staying with him in the prison. Of course, the prison that he stayed was not the same, but it was a house prison where Paul had a bit of freedom. But still then, what we could see is that Epaphroditus went there, and then he was well aware that why he went there is not just to deliver the things and then return back, but he has to also stay with him in the prison and then help him as long as Paul needs him. And then for us, I don't think when a pastor or church leader is taken into prison because of the gospel, I don't think that we would like to visit them. But in the case of Epaphroditus, what we could see is that he was willing to go and be in the prison with Paul and serve him as long as he needs. And then the second thing is that from Philippi to Rome, to go from Philippi to Rome, it was not an easy task. Like, as I have seen just some commentators, they said that it took somewhere around 6 to 8 weeks from Philippi to Rome to reach there. And then that is also if you are in good condition, if you are strong enough, and then if the weather gives your side, if the weather is good. In that way, you will be able to reach like in 1 month. But it will at least take like 1 month to reach from Philippi to Rome. So on the way, there were bandits, thieves, many things. Many people could attack us, and so many things could happen to us. But in spite of all of that, Epaphroditus was being well aware. But still, then what he did was he still decided to go and be a deliverer of the blessings that Philippian church wants to bless with. And then the last challenges that we could see when Epaphroditus went to Paul, as he was going there in the prison, and Paul was in the prison, so the Roman officials could charge even Epaphroditus with the same charge, with the same accusation that Paul was facing. So since since Epaphroditus was accompanying Paul in the prison, the Roman officials could have charged him with the same accusations that Paul was facing. But one thing that we could know from all of this, that instead of all of that, like, Epaphroditus was not foolish, but he was aware of all those consequences and difficulties and challenges that he would go through to go to Paul and be with him. But in spite of all of that, what we could see is that he still decided to go and deliver the blessings from the Philippian church. So that is truly admirable for you and I from the life of Epaphroditus. And then verse 26, from there also we could see that for he longed after you all and was full of heaviness, because that you had heard that he had been sick. So from verse 26, we could see Epaphroditus' character very clearly, what was in his heart. Here we could see Epaphroditus was longing to see the Philippian church from where he came. So he was longing to see them. He went to the extent that he became very stressed and troubled. Here in verse 26, we could clearly see that for he longed after you all and was full of heaviness. In other words, we could see he was full of trouble in his heart. The reason, it is not that he wanted to go back. At this point of time, as we said, Epaphroditus was still with Paul in the prison. So he wanted to go back to Philippi. It was not because that he wanted to go back and then he was homesick or anything like that. He was missing his home, nothing like that. But the reason we could clearly see here in the last part of verse 26, here, because that you had heard that he had been sick. So the reason why Epaphroditus from Rome, why he wanted to go back to Philippi was because the Philippian church somehow have heard that Epaphroditus was sick. If we look at verse 27 and 30, we would see that Epaphroditus, after going to Rome with Paul, he got seriously sick to the point that he was almost died. But we don't really know exactly what was the sickness that he went through. But he was sick to the point of death, almost dead. So that very news, the Philippian church have heard it. And then because of that, they were burdened and they were worried about Epaphroditus. And that very news, Epaphroditus heard that the Philippian church were worrying about him. So Epaphroditus did not want to be a burden for the church. That is, he wanted to go back to Philippian church, and meet them there and personally so that they will be relieved. So that is the reason that why he wanted to go back to Philippi. If Paul really wanted him to be there, he could have stayed even longer. But the only reason why Epaphroditus wanted to go back to Philippi was he did not want it to be a burden for the Philippian church. So from here we could see his love for his church and also for Christ. And then if we look verse 26 and 12, verse 28, there a very beautiful thing that you and I could see as a child of God, that is, see, the first thing, Epaphroditus was worried, or his love for the church, we could clearly see from verse 26. And then not only Epaphroditus' his love, but the church love for both Paul and Epaphroditus also we could see. And then Paul's love for both the church and then for Epaphroditus also we could see from verses 26 to 28. So that's indeed a beautiful thing for you and I, that the reciprocal love or the mutual love among Christians, as you and I, we should also be practicing it in our day-to-day life, that this is a great blessing and this is a great lesson that we could draw, a mutual love among Christians as a child of God, and a reciprocal love, we could say, that we could see among themselves. Even in the book of Acts, chapter 2, we could see where they share one another, selling their possessions and their belonging, and they share one another. Similar to that here, what we could see is that the love, that how they love each other, how they express their love for one another, that we could see. And then verse 29. In verse 29, we could see that here Paul was about to send back Epaphroditus to the Philippian church. The verse 25 itself starts with, "Yet I suppose it necessary to send to you." So that very phrase begins that we have to talk a little bit about the preceding verse. Why Paul starts with "yet"? Because Paul actually wanted to personally visit Philippian church again. Of course, the Philippian church was the one that Paul founded during his missionary journey, and most probably in second missionary journey. But at this point of time, he was in the prison. So he was just trying to tell them that he wanted to visit them again. However, since he was in the prison, he could not. So here, as Paul was trying to send back to Epaphroditus to the church of Philippi, so Paul recommend Epaphroditus with great commendation. For example, he has said in verse 29, "Receive him," that means receive Epaphroditus, "therefore in the Lord with all gladness." Not only that, but also hold such in reputation. In other words, hold him with high honor. So the reason we could see in verse 30, why? And Epaphroditus really deserved to be worshipped, to be welcomed and received in that way. And I believe that the best thing for Epaphroditus at this point of time would have been to be received and welcomed in this way. I don't think that he would expect that the Philippian church would give him a material blessing. But I would say the best blessings that he could ever expected was this, that is to be received with honor and with gladness. And the reason why he should be received and welcomed in that way, because in verse 30 says, "Because for the work of Christ he was nigh unto death, not regarding his life to supply for your lack of service toward me." So the very work that he had done, the very work for you, for me, it might be just a delivery man, but as we have seen, he was more than just a delivery man. So the work that he had done, that is to go to that extent to Rome and do the things that the Philippian church themselves could not do. So Paul counted that very work as the work of Christ, being bridge, or being the one who come and stand in the gap. See, the Philippian church might have expressed their love. As the book of James said, faith without work is dead, which here also we could apply that. Philippian church might have expressed their love verbally, that we love Paul, we care for him. But unless they do something practically, or unless they extend their material blessing or material help, that would be just like in vain. So, or we can say halfway done. But because of Epaphroditus coming in the middle, who stand between Paul and Epaphroditus to bring the blessing, or to bring the material blessing from Philippi to Philippian church to Paul, that he plays an important role, very great role, that you and I should be considering it. So from here, I would just like to draw like a few applications or takeaways that you and I could learn. If you have not been able to understand so far, but at least let us keep this in mind, that Epaphroditus was a simple man like you and like me. I'm not talking about great apostles, or I'm not talking about prophets or priests or Jesus himself. I'm not talking about any of them whom we may have an excuse that it's difficult to follow them. But just a normal person, a simple person like you and me, We can say, if you want to call him as just a delivery man, delivery guy. So, in spite of that, and also in spite of appearing in just few verses, we could draw great blessings. That is, he was being useful for the ministry, for the extension of kingdom, for the both Paul and Philippians playing the middleman plays an important role. He had been a blessing for either side. So, for you and for me, as our life here on earth is not very long, let's take the example of being here in the campus. Many of you are here maybe just for 2 years or 3 years. All of us are enrolled for at least 2 or 3 years, not more than that. So you and I, we could play a role of blessing to our fellow brothers and sisters, as we could learn from Epaphroditus' life. He was just a normal man like you and me. We can't have an excuse saying that he has a superpower and we can't follow, or he was a great apostle. But nothing like that. That he was just a simple man like you and like me. So he had been a blessing, and the life that he had lived, that was, I would say, a life that was well spent, and that was worth living by a blessing for others. So for you and for me also, we can be like him. Even while being here on the campus, we can be a channel of blessing for others each and every single day and each and every moment. So may God bless all of us through this short sharing. May I request our principal to please lead us in prayer and close this session.